Remember, remember, the 5th of November, the Gunpowder Plot, a day never to be forgot. I think it is quite appropriate to start a new book reading, which is called The Secret History of the Jesuits, with a little reminder of remembering the Gunpowder Plot of 1605, without which we would not be in the possession of the King James Bible today. Welcome to a new video from Joggler 66, Hour of the Truth, and the introduction of a new book reading, The Secret History of the Jesuits by French author Edmond Paris, or Edmond Paris as he would pronounce it in English. The remembrance on the 5th of November, I started it that way because today we have the 6th of November, and yesterday on the 5th of November I recorded the first German reading of this book. Fitting, of course, on the 5th of November, so I thought even we have today a day later I can start the same way. Also because there are a lot of people who have no idea that the Gunpowder Plot ever took place, what it was all about, because they only know this movie that is out in the mainstream media that is called V for Vendetta, and dealing with a person there called Guy Fawkes, who is actually there presented as a hero, which he was not, because he was a Jesuit. And what are the Jesuits all about? Well, that is something that we are going to find out in the book reading The Secret History of the Jesuits. Now, I've read Rulers of Evil online and made a playlist on that. I've read Babylon Mystery Religion from Ralph Woodrow online and made a playlist of that. And of course, you know, I just finished the book All Roads Lead to Rome from Michael de Semlyen about the ecumenical movement and also about the workings of the Jesuits. And I thought that this book, The Secret History of the Jesuits, published in 1975 by author Edmond Paris, would be a very nice continuation in the same spirit. Also, this is the second book that I'm reading simultaneously in English and German at the same time. But I have to say that I do not make any complicated work in the video work of this book reading. I will just put a few pictures in there, and I try to quote-unquote entertain you with the reading and the truth of this book, The Secret History of the Jesuits, which is absolutely in line with everything that I've read before, and will also probably be in line with everything that I read after this. Now you say, well, that's the 6th of November when he records this, but we are now, I don't know when I'm gonna publish it, but it's quite some time ago, because I still have to finish a few videos on the book Behind the Dictators, which I also read. And have a look at the playlist, because Behind the Dictators is dealing a lot with the same things that The Secret History of the Jesuits deals with, because Behind the Dictators deals with the relationship of the Third Reich, the National Socialist Reich of Adolf Hitler, and the connection to the Roman Catholic Church. And that are also things that are discussed in this book from Edmond Paris. So if you are not familiar with that, go to the playlist Behind the Dictators and have a look at that. And what I wanted to say actually is that after reading all these books, we know the importance of the Jesuits. And surely when we are aware of what the 5th of November, the Gunpowder Plot, was really all about, we are very much aware of what the Jesuits are doing and dealing with. We have to understand that if the Gunpowder Plot from the 5th of November in 1605 would have been successful, we would not be today in the possession of the only, in my eyes at least, and I don't even discuss that subject anymore, but we would not be in the possession of the only uncorrupted Word of God, the King James Bible. You have to understand that whenever you're going to do discussion on that, that all the forgeries of the Bibles only came because the Jesuits hated and still hate the King James Version of the Bible. That's why they wanted to have this Gunpowder Plot to get King James out of there, because just a year before he started with the commission to work on an English Bible, which became then the 1611 King James Authorized Version. And it was not authorized by King James anyway. It was authorized by the people because of their extensive knowledge and their extensive use of that Bible. That's why that Bible is called the authorized version. Whenever anybody has any problems with that, well, I turn them to my readings that I do in Hour of the Truth, an Understandable History of the Bible by Samuel C. Gibb, and watch the videos from Walter Veit, Battle of the Bibles and Changing the Word, and you will see how all the Bibles are corrupted and the King James is the only true preserved Word of God that we have today. And that is what the Jesuits have sworn in their inauguration to defeat. They are founded only to defeat Protestantism. Well, that's something we will read very much along in this book, so I'm not gonna take everything that is written in that book already in advance. I want to leave you to it, but when I start reading this book now, there's a very small publisher's introduction, and after that publisher's introduction, we have the introduction of Dr. Alberto Rivera. And Dr. Alberto Rivera was a former Jesuit who was saved by Jesus Christ and was killed by the Jesuits in 1997. Now, some people think that Alberto Rivera is legit. Some people think that he is not legit. I think that he is legit very much, because I've studied a lot of his stuff. And if you want to go a little bit into that, I can advise you to go to the website spirituallysmart.com from, I think, his name is Thomas Richard, and he has done very wonderful research also into Alberto Rivera, and that you can understand where he comes from, and that you can understand that he was absolutely a legitimate person, and that he was a former Jesuit priest, even up to today, 2016, the only Jesuit priest ever to come out of the order and reveal the secrets of the order. Now, of course, there is that little thing that you have to keep in mind and say to yourself, well, once a Jesuit, always a Jesuit. Actually, that is true, and I wouldn't trust any Jesuit, actually. But Alberto Rivera I trust. And why is that? I mean, it's a gut feeling, and it's about what he said, and it's that you have to understand that God still is in control. And that God called Alberto Rivera to do the things that he did. And well, I'm not going to discuss Alberto Rivera anymore here, but in my point of view, he is legitimate, and I'm looking very much forward to read his introduction to the book here. And today we will just have a little look at the book. We will just see the foreword and the introduction by Alberto Rivera, and yeah, the foreword of the author. So this is just to get you in the mood for the coming reading of this book, which will take the next few weeks probably for me to read and discuss, as I did the other books. So now, without any further ado, remember the 5th of November, remember that we are dealing with the Jesuit order, Regimini Militantis Ecclesiae, the military order of the Roman Catholic Church, when we are dealing with the secret history of the Jesuits. Now, a short publisher's introduction follows. There is no other person more qualified to introduce Edmond Paris' book, The Secret History of the Jesuits, than Dr. Alberto Rivera, a former Jesuit priest under the extreme oath of induction, who was trained in the Vatican and briefed on the history of the Jesuits. The information in this book is factual and fully documented, and it should be read by every Bible-believing Christian in the United States and Canada. And, of course, I have to add here, it should be read by every Bible-believing Christian all over the world. It is not only important for Americans, it is very important also for Europeans and for the rest of the world, because this book deals most of the time with the Second 30-Year War, starting in 1914 to 1945. The Second 30-Year War, because the first one was from 1618 to 1648, to kill more than 12 million, mostly German, Protestants at that time. And because this Second 30-Year War between 1914 and 1945 were called World Wars, I think it is in the interest of all the people in the whole world, not only in the United States and Canada, to understand this. That's also why I read it in German, because there are a lot of German-speaking people spread all over the world. And of course, all the English-speaking people can enjoy this English reading of the book, The Secret History of the Jesuits. Now the Bible says in Hosea 4, verse 6, quote, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge," unquote. And that is the reason why I'm reading this and other books. Because there are so many things that are wrong in our education system today. Our education system is an indoctrination system, and the education is led by the Jesuit order. So they teach what they want to teach. They teach what they find important, and they teach their history, and that is not the true history. And unless you are familiar with the true history, you cannot even understand the Bible correctly. Because in the Bible we are speaking about prophecies, and prophecies in the Bible are just history spoken of, history in advance. So when you are taught wrong history, you cannot match the history you are taught in this world with the prophecy God wrote in His Word. And that's why it is very important to have a real knowledge of a real history, and to be aware of that the teachings of history in this world are all controlled by the Jesuit order. And because of that lack of knowledge, as Hosea says, "My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge." First of all, because they are indoctrinated with false quote-unquote knowledge, and second of all, because they are distracted from studying things like history and the Bible, of course, in these days, because it is so much easier to have an iPad and watch a movie on there and get distracted by, I don't know, poker games or online gaming or watching online television series or movies and all that stuff, and being caught up in social media like Facebook and Twitter and I don't know what all. That's all so much easier and so much more convenient than doing a study of things that are really important in our life, and therefore my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So we come to Dr. Rivera's introduction now. The most dangerous of men are those who appear very religious, especially when they are organized and in a position of authority. They have the deep respect of the people who are ignorant of their ungodly push for power behind the scenes. These religious men who pretend to love God will resort to murder, incite revolution and wars if necessary to help their cause. They are crafty, intelligent, smooth religious politicians who live in a shadowy world of secrets, intrigue and phony holiness. This pattern, seen in the secret history of the Jesuits, spiritually speaking, can be seen in the scribes, Pharisees and Sadducees at the time of Jesus Christ. This same evil spirit directed the Roman emperors to issue the 10 murderous decrees to persecute the early Christian church. The early fathers observed most of the ancient Babylonian system plus Jewish theology and Greek philosophy. Now this is a very important sentence that you just cannot read and go over it, because you really have to understand that, you have to put that in. The quote-unquote early fathers observed most of the ancient Babylonian system plus Jewish theology and Greek philosophy. What does that mean? That they observed ancient Babylonian system plus Jewish theology means that's where the Talmud comes from. That was the mixing of the holy with the profane. The word of God and the teaching of God, which I call in the first place Jewish theology, with the Babylonian system. And that then became the new Jewish theology. And of course afterward Greek philosophy. And we all know that the Roman Catholic Church is built upon Greece. Because when you read Revelation 13, where there is a beast described that comes out of the sea, out of many tongues and nations and peoples and kindreds, or what's it called? Yeah? That beast has the appearance of a leopard. And the leopard was the beast of Greece. And Greek philosophy is what the Roman Catholic Church, most and for all, is based upon. You don't have to believe me, just turn to the workings of the so-called evangelical doctor with the name of, let me get this here in a second, Thomas Aquinas, who wrote a 5-part, very, very, very big work, and that is called Summa Theologica. And he based everything that he wrote in there on Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle, the 3 philosophers of Greece in that time. And he is called the evangelical doctor of the Roman Catholic Church because they love his teaching. So that comes from philosophy, that comes from men's teaching, not from God. So the early fathers observed most of the ancient Babylonian system plus the Jewish theology and Greek philosophy. They all perverted most of the teachings of Christ and his apostles. They paved the way for the Roman Catholic machine that was to come into existence. Piously, they attacked, perverted, added to, and took away from the Bible. This religious Antichrist spirit working through them is seen again when Ignatius de Loyola created the Jesuits to secretly accomplish 2 major goals for the Roman Catholic institution. First, universal political power, and second, a universal church in fulfillment of the prophecies of Revelation 6, 13, 17, and 18. Yes. 2 major goals for the Roman Catholic institution. Universal political power. What is another word for universal? Catholic. Meaning Catholic political power. And of course, when you go to my readings that I've done before, Rulers of Evil, Babylon Mystery Religion, Behind the Dictators, all the other things, you will always already know that I always said, and I proved it in these readings that I've just summed up, that the Roman Catholic Church in the first place is a political power that hides itself under the veil of quote-unquote Christianity. The Roman Catholic Church is nothing else than the pagan Roman Empire baptized. That's what James Edkin Wiley said, and I absolutely agree on that. And we have to understand that the Roman Catholic Church in the very first place is a political power. So, the Jesuits were to accomplish 2 major goals for the Roman Catholic institution. Get universal political power, as there was before the Reformation, because in the time before the Reformation, the 1260 years, we were still in those years in the Reformation, but that is only because that for the elect's sake this time has been shortened. We were still in the so-called Dark Ages in that time, in the time of the reign of the Antichrist of the Bible, the 1260 years between 538 and 1798, there the Pope crowned every king in Europe. He was the master of the politics in Europe at that time. So it is not only for the Jesuits to secretly accomplish the universal political power, but no, to restore the universal political power that the Pope once had. And of course, second, a universal, a Catholic Church. The same thing. Before the Reformation, there was a universal, a Catholic political power in the known Western world and a universal Catholic Church in the known Western world. There was no other church and there was no other political power but that controlled by the Vatican. And that's what the Jesuits were founded to restore. By the time Ignatius de Loyola arrived on the scene, the Protestant Reformation had seriously damaged the Roman Catholic system. Just what I said. Ignatius de Loyola came to the conclusion that the only way his quote-unquote church could survive was by enforcing the canons and doctrines on the temporal power of the Pope and the Roman Catholic institution, not by just destroying the physical life of the people alone, as the Dominican priests were doing through the Inquisition, but by infiltration and penetration into every sector of life. Now, the Roman Catholic Inquisition started in 1203. That does not say that before that time there was no persecution of Bible-believing Christians. Understand that correctly. Bible-believing Christians were, well, if you can call them Bible-believing Christians, because they were writing the Bible even as they went along, were persecuted from the moment that Jesus Christ was taken down from the cross. The apostles. Except for John, all the apostles died a martyr's death, as far as we know. We don't know from everyone what exactly happened to him, but they all died a martyr's death, except from John, the Revelator. Okay? So, after that, you had the persecution of the Christians until Constantine took over Christianity and baptized the pagan Roman system with Christianity by making Christianity the main religion in the Roman in the Roman Empire at that time, in 331. And then, of course, changing the Sabbath and all that stuff, and then you had all the councils, Council of Nicaea, Council of Laodicea, and all these other stuff. But actually, that was not ending the persecution, but that was only infiltrating the Christian denomination, if I can call it that way, the Christian belief system. They couldn't destroy it with the sword of metal, so they are trying to destruct it with the sword of words. But the only true word is the word of God, and that cannot be destructed with the lies of Satan. But anyway, the Inquisition was working long before 1203 and also working after 1805, when it so-called stopped. And it's still working today. Why do you think we still have that office of the Inquisition in the Vatican, which is nowadays called the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith? But it is still the same. It has still the same orders to do. Changed its name, but it didn't change its purpose. Protestantism must be conquered and used for the benefit of the popes. That's an interesting sentence, huh? Protestantism must be conquered and used for the benefit of the popes. How can you do that? only when you twist the truth, only when you turn everything that is true 180 degrees around and tell that for truth, and selling the lie for the truth, selling the people what is black as white, just as it is stated in the Jesuit oath. I will see white as black if the Roman Catholic hierarchy tells me so. That is a way how Protestantism can be conquered and used for the benefit of the popes. Just think of what we've read in All Roads Lead to Rome by Michael the Semlien over the ecumenical movement from the last 50 plus years after Vatican II. That is how they conquered Protestantism and used it for the benefit of the popes, that all Protestant denominations are coming back under the wings of Rome by making compromise that Rome does never do, because Rome does never change, but the others have to change, and therefore you have this World Council of Churches, and therefore you have the contract, the Lutheran Worldwide Federation signed with the Roman Catholic Church in 1999 on the doctrine of the justification, and in 2004 when the Methodist Church did the same. That is actually all the work of the Jesuits, where they conquered and used the Protestantism for the benefit of the popes. That today nobody even knows anymore what Protestantism is, what a Protestant stands for. First and for all, that is the identification of the office of the papacy as the biblical, historical and prophetic Antichrist. Now go to your local church, ask your pastor or your priest who is the Antichrist of the Bible, and you will get all answers that you can imagine, but you will never get the answer that it is the papacy. And that is what the Protestant reformers all identified, and what the early fathers, if I can call them that, the apostles, the basis of our belief system, all knew that the papacy was being the Antichrist. As Paul said, he who now letteth until he is taken out of the way, then the man of sin will be revealed. He who now letteth is the Roman emperor at that time. And who succeeded the Roman emperor? The Pope, the Bishop of Bishops. Yeah, right. So Protestantism must be conquered and used for the benefit of the popes, because when Protestantism can be used for the benefit of the popes, Protestantism is over. It's done. And the people are back under the authority of the Pope, the Antichrist of the Bible. And that's the goal from the beginning. Satan wants them all. Satan hates mankind, and he wants everyone to perish as much as God wants everyone to be saved. Now that was Ignatius de Loyola's personal proposal, among others, to Pope Paul III, to bring Protestantism conquered for the benefit of the Pope. Jesuits immediately went to work, secretly infiltrating all the Protestant groups, including, listen closely, their families. Secretly infiltrating all the Protestant places of work, hospitals, schools, colleges, etc. Today, the Jesuits have almost completed that mission. Now, when I read about today, I remind you that this book was published 40 years ago, 1975. We have now 2016, so 41 years ago the book was published. So when we are reading during this book of today, then remind you that we are speaking of more than 40 years ago. And lots of things have happened in the meantime, so it's probably here and there even worse. But today, they say already here, the Jesuits have almost completed that mission. Yeah, because 1975 was 10 years after the closing of Vatican II. And Vatican II was the final stroke against Protestantism. Now, the Bible puts the power of a local church into the hands of a godly pastor. but the cunning Jesuits successfully managed over the years to remove that power into the hands of denomination headquarters, and have now pushed almost all of the Protestant denominations into the arms of the Vatican. This is exactly what Ignatius de Loyola set out to accomplish: a universal church and the end of Protestantism. As you read the secret history of the Jesuits, you will see there is a parallel between the religious and political sectors. The author, Mr. Paris, reveals the penetration and infiltration of the Jesuits into the governments and nations of the world to manipulate the course of history by setting up dictatorships and weakening democracies such as the United States of America, by paving the way for social, political, moral, military, educational, and religious anarchy. Well, as I told you, I'm reading this now on the 6th of November 2016, and within a few days you will have this scam elections in the United States of America. I actually don't have any idea how you Americans can keep up with that scam without falling dead from laughter, I almost said. I mean, this is such a theater. This actors Clinton and Trump are playing there before you. I just don't get it that people are taking that seriously and even seriously considering going to the ballots and vote for one of this Antichrist candidates. Because Hillary Clinton is as Catholic controlled as is Donald Trump. Yeah. So whether you choose the one or the other, you're always choosing evil. Always. And that is a very prime example of how the Jesuits weakened democracies such as the United States of America by paving the way for social, political, moral, military, educational, and religious anarchy. That's what they did. And they control both sides, and it doesn't matter who you choose, you are only choosing evil. You are always choosing the candidate of the Antichrist of the Bible. And this theater that they are playing is so ridiculous that I think most people should really see through it and then finally take their conclusions to the ballot and not go voting. But anyway, when this video is published, this is already months later, so who cares? But maybe you take that for the next elections then, if there are if there are coming any elections anyway in 4 years again, who knows. But Alberto Rivera continues here. The man, Edmond Paris, he is going to introduce to us. In the prophetical works of the Book of Revelation, Edmond Paris became a martyr for Jesus. In exposing such a conspiracy, he put his life at stake for the truth of the prophetical signs to be known. Edmond Paris never knew me, but I knew him without meeting him personally when I, with other Jesuits under the extreme oath of induction, was being briefed on the names of institutions and individuals in Europe who were dangerous to the goals of the Roman Catholic institution. His name was given to us. We also have, next to the secret history of the Jesuits, other works from Edmond Paris. And the titles are Le Vatican contre la France. That's the French original title of The Vatican Against France. Genocide in Satellite Croatia. And Le Vatican contre l'Europe, means the Vatican against Europe. The Edmond Paris works on Roman Catholicism brought about the pledge on the part of the Jesuits to, first, destroy him, second, destroy his reputation, and third, including his family, and third, destroy his work. Yeah? So because Edmond Paris set out to expose the Jesuits for what they are, fully documented in all his books, they wanted to destroy him, destroy his reputation, including his family, and destroy his work. And even now these great works of Edmond Paris are being tampered with but we are praying that God will continue to preserve them when they are most needed for the salvation of Roman Catholic people. And not only Roman Catholic people, let me make this sure. It doesn't matter what belief system you follow, whether you follow Catholicism, whether you follow Islam, whether you follow Buddhism, whether you follow Hinduism, whether you follow the so-called Protestant belief system, the apostate Protestant belief system. I don't mean when you're a Bible-believing Christian, I mean when you are a Protestant who is organized in any church, Methodist, Baptist, Lutheran, whatever, even Seventh-day Adventist, whatever denomination, so-called, you're in, it doesn't matter. It is all away from the true Word of God, from the Bible. And it is not only for Roman Catholic people, it is for all those people too. Everybody who is not a Bible-only, let's say it maybe that way, who is not only a Bible-only person, who only takes the authoritative Word of God as their authority for their conscience. Everyone who does not have that, for them this book and these works of Edmond Paris are most needed for the salvation. Yeah. So these were the last words here from Alberto Rivera on the introduction of the secret history of the Jesuits. And now we're going to continue directly with the foreword. And we're going to start with a little quote. "The love of truth is our only salvation." That is a quote from John Guéhenno from the French Academy. The love of truth is our only salvation. And where is the only truth to be found? In the Word of God. "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nobody comes to the Father but by me." Jesus Christ is truth, and truth is only to be found in Jesus Christ, and salvation is only to be found in Jesus Christ. And we also read something in Ephesians chapter 4 verse 25, quote, "Wherefore, putting away lying, speak every man truth with his neighbor, for we are members one of another." Unquote. Now the foreword by the author Edmond Paris. A last-century writer, Adolphe Michel, recalled that Voltaire estimated the number of works published over the years on the Jesuits to be about 6,000. "What number have we reached a century later?" asked Adolphe Michel, only to conclude immediately, "No matter. As long as there are Jesuits, books will have been written against them. There is nothing new left to be said on their account, but new generations of readers come every day. Will these readers search old books?" The reason just mentioned would be enough to justify us taking up against this oft-told subject. In fact, most early books retracting the history of the Jesuits cannot be found anymore. Only in public libraries can they still be consulted, which makes them out of reach for most readers. I think most people don't even know where the public library in their town is. With the aim of secondly informing the public at large in mind, a summary of these works seemed necessary. But there is another reason as good as the one just mentioned. At the same time as new generations of readers come, new generations of Jesuits come to light. And these work today with the same tortuous and tenacious methods which so often in the past set to work the defensive reflexes of nations and governments. The sons of Loyola are today, and may we say more than ever, the leading wing of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, the author says this in a book published, as I told you, 1975. The sons of Loyola are today the leading wing of the Roman Catholic Church. Even at that time, Edmond Paris saw that. And we are today, in 2016 or 2017, whenever you're gonna watch this, under the reign of a quote-unquote white pope, bishop of bishops, who is a Jesuit of the fourth vow of induction. The Sons of Loyola are today the leading wing of the Roman Catholic Church? Absolutely, because otherwise they would not even dare to put out a Jesuit in front. But because of what I've read to you before, that there are so many books written about the Jesuits, and they are only to be found here and there in the libraries, if they are to be found anywhere anyway, because most of the books have disappeared. They can only do that because people do not know what the Jesuits and who the Jesuits really are. They are the leading wing of the Roman Catholic Church. They are leading the Roman Catholic Church, and they have been doing that, I say, from before 1814. Many people think that with the reintroduction of the Jesuits by Pope Pius XII in 1814, the Jesuits actually took over the control of the white popes, but I am very much sure about that. That was already long before that time, at least of the time of Lorenzo Ricci from 1758 on, because he was working the agenda, as I was explaining by reading Rulers of Evil, the secularization of the order, and by that covering them up for what they are. And the Sons of Loyola are today the leading wing of the Roman Catholic Church, I say, because they rule as they please, because nobody calls them out for what they really are, because nobody reads the books written about them the last few hundred years, because those books are not to be found anymore, for the most part. As well, if not better disguised than of old, they remain the most eminent ultramontanes, the discreet but efficacious agents of the Holy See throughout the world, the camouflaged champions of its politics, the secret army of the papacy. Yes, regimini militantes ecclesiae, the title of the papal bull that put the Jesuits into action in the first place by Antichrist Pope Paul III in 1940. They are a military order, and they work with military directives. First of all, Sun Tzu, the art of war. That is their credo. That is what they work on. So when you know that, you understand how the world works when the world is ruled by the Jesuits, the secret army of the papacy. Well, they are not so secret anymore because they even come out in the open, but it is a secret that they are an army. It is a secret to most people that the leading Jesuit is called a general. He is also called the Black Pope, but he is called a general. It is an army, it is a military organization. Regimini militantes ecclesiae. And we have to see that to understand the working of the Jesuits. Now, for this reason, the subject of the Jesuits will never be exhausted, and even though the literature concerning them is so plentiful, every epoch will have the duty to add a few pages to it, to mark the continuity of this occult system started 4 centuries ago for the great glory of God, but in fact for the glory of the Pope. Which of course in Roman Catholic circles is the same, because in Roman Catholic circles the Pope is God. Because the Roman Catholic Church teaches that the Pope is Jesus Christ hidden under a veil of flesh. In spite of the general move towards an ever-increasing laicization, in spite of the ineluctable progress of rationalism, which reduces a little more every day the domain of dogma, the Roman Catholic Church wouldn't give up the great purpose which has been her goal from the beginning: to gather under her crozier all the nations of the universe. Crozier is the cross, okay? To gather under her crozier all the nations of the universe. One world religion, one world government, one world economy, the economy led by the Jesuits, Knights of Malta, most and for all, who are in possession of all big companies in the world, with the globalization becoming less and less companies and all under their control. And of course, with the combining of state and church, you have the one world religion and the one world government in the same hand. The hand of the Pope. Go back to my reading of All Roads Lead to Rome to get an understanding of that. This monumental mission must go on, whatever happens amongst pagans as well as amongst separated Christians. You know, that is the new term they have for heretics since the Second Vatican Council in 1965, separated Christians or separated brethren. The secular clergy having, in particular, the duty to hold the acquired positions, which is quite arduous nowadays. It is up to certain regular orders to increase the flock of the faithful by converting the heretics and pagans, a work even more arduous. The duty is to preserve or acquire, to defend or attack, and at the front of the battle there is that mobile force of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. Properly speaking, this society is not secular, nor regular in terms of its constitution, but a kind of subtle company intervening where and when it is convenient in the Church and outside the Church. In short, quote, the agent most skillful, most the agent most skillful, most persevering, most fearless, most convinced of the papal authority, unquote, as wrote one of its best historians. Yeah? I'm going to read that sentence again because I butchered that a little bit. Sorry for that. Properly speaking, this society is not secular nor regular in terms of its constitution, but a kind of subtle company intervening where and when it is convenient in the Church and outside the Church. In short, the agent most skillful, most persevering, most fearless, most convinced of the papal authority, as wrote one of its best historians, in this case Adolphe Michel. We will see how this body of Janissaries was formed, what service without price it rendered the papacy. We will see also how so much effectual zeal was to make it indispensable to the institution it served, exerting such an influence over it that its general was named with good reason the Black Pope, as it became more and more difficult to distinguish in the government of the Church the authority of the White Pope and that of its powerful coadjutor. It is then at the same time a retrospective and a bringing up to date of the history of Jesuitism which is found in this book. As the majority of works regarding the Jesuits do not refer to the paramount part they took in the events which have subverted the world during the past 50 years, we thought it was time to fill up the gap, or, more precisely, to start with our modest contribution a deeper study into the subject, and do this without concealing the obstacles which will be met by the non-apologist authors wanting to make public writings on this burning subject. Of all the factors we have played, of all the factors which have played a part in the international life of a country I'm sorry, what's that? I got something with my eyes here. I think I'm reading it all wrong. I'm very sorry. Gonna start all over. Of all the factors which have played a part in the international life of a century full of confusion and upheavals, one of the most decisive, nevertheless best recognized, resides in the ambition of the Roman Church. Her secular desire to extend her influence towards the East made her the spiritual ally of pan-Germanism and its accomplice in the attempt to gain supreme power which twice, in 1914 and 1939, brought death and ruin to the peoples of Europe. Well, that was my point. This second inquisitional 30-year war between 1914 and 1945, when it ended and broke out 1914 and 1939. Why did the First World War break out in 1914? Well, because the Jesuits had established the Federal Reserve System that gave them all the money they needed to finance these wars, and we will probably go into that during the reading a little bit later here. 1913, the establishment of the Federal Reserve System owned by the Jesuits and by that the Vatican, and then the outbreak in 1914 of the First World War. Now the public is practically unaware of the overwhelming responsibility carried by the Vatican and its Jesuits in the start of the two world wars, a situation which may be explained in part by the gigantic finances at the disposition of the Vatican and its Jesuits, giving them power in so many spheres, especially since the last conflict. This is exactly what I was talking about. Founding the Federal Reserve System in 1913, giving the Vatican and its Jesuits the power in so many spheres, and first and for all, the gigantic finances at the disposition of the Vatican. Therefore, the Vatican needed the Federal Reserve System. It doesn't matter that they had to sink the Titanic to get rid of their opposition on that, as much as it didn't matter for them to kill at least 6 million Jews to get the country of Israel founded after the Second World War, which is used for the Vatican's diabolical replay of Daniel's 70th week, which has been completely fulfilled by Jesus Christ 2000 years ago. They do whatever they need to do to accomplish what they want to do, to accomplish their goal, to accomplish Satan's goal. And they sacrifice everybody who is in their way. They don't care. In fact, the part they took in those tragic events has hardly been mentioned until the present time, except by apologists eager to disguise it. It is with the aim of rectifying this and establishing the true facts that we present in this and other books the political activity of the Vatican during the contemporary epoch, activity which mutually concerns the Jesuits. This study is based on irrefutable archive documents, publications from well-known political personalities, diplomats, ambassadors, and eminent writers, most of whom are Catholics, even attested by the imprimatur. And this is a very important sentence I have to repeat, because you have to understand this book, like the other books I've read, but this book is not conspiracy theory, as many people would maybe like to call it. This book is proof of conspiracy, because it is based on irrefutable archive documents. It is based on publications from well-known political personalities. It is based on irrefutable speaks and sayings of diplomats, ambassadors, and eminent writers, most of whom are Catholics even themselves, meaning it comes from the horse's mouth itself. Now these documents bring to light the secret actions of the Vatican and its perfidious actions in creating conflicts between nations when it served its interest. With the help of the conclusive articles, we show that we show the part played by the Church in the rise of totalitarian regimes in Europe. These testimonies and documents constitute a crushing indictment and, so far, no apologist has tried to disprove them, because they know they would not succeed anyway. On the 1st of May 1938, the Mercure de France reminded us of what had been said 4 years earlier. Quote, "The Mercure de France of the 15th of January 1934 said, and nobody contradicted it up to today, that it was Antichrist Pope Pius XII who made Hitler. He came to power not so much through legal means, but because the Pope influenced the Centrum, which is the German Catholic Party. Does the Vatican think it made a political error in opening the way to power to Hitler? It doesn't seem so." No. And that is also something that, unquote, and that is also something that we have to understand while reading this book. I cannot every time make the comment, but you have to understand, and you have to let that flow into your brain and understand it and really process it in the right way. The Antichrist of the Bible is the papacy. Pope Pius XII, who will be mentioned a lot more in this book, even in the coming reading in the next few minutes. You have to understand that it is all the plan of those people. So of course for the outside they say, oh, didn't the Pope know about this? How is that possible? And why didn't the Pope act here? And why didn't the Pope act there? It's because the Pope is the puppet master of all the governments of the world, even at that time. Yeah? And the Mercure de France, this French newspaper, on the 15th of January 34 said no, and asked the questions if Pope Pius, that it was Pope Pius who made Hitler. Does the Vatican think it made a political error in the way to power to Hitler? It doesn't seem so. No, of course not, because it was their plan all along. It didn't seem so when that was written, which was on the day following the Anschluss, when Austria was united to the Third Reich, nor later when Nazi aggressions multiplied, nor during the whole of the Second World War. In fact, on the 24th of July 1959, the successor of Pius XII, John XXIII, conferred on his personal friend Franz von Papen the honorary title of Secret Chamberlain. This man had been a spy in the United States during the First World War, and one of those responsible for the Hitler's dictatorship and the Anschluss. One must suffer from a peculiar kind of blindness not to see such plain facts. And I'm only shortly going into Franz von Papen, who was a Knight of Malta and who signed with Eugenio Pacelli in 1933 when he was Secretary of State in Vatican, the former nuncio to Germany between 1917 and 1929, the Concordat with Germany. Eugenio Pacelli, the later Pope Pius XII, working together with his also with his personal friend Franz von Papen, Knight of Malta, the power behind Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler was the puppet, Franz von Papen was making the politics. Yeah, and we're gonna even read about what happened to Franz von Papen here on the 24th of July. He was made the secret the title. He was given the honorary title of Secret Chamberlain. So what happened to Franz von Papen in the Nuremberg trials after the Second World War? You wanna know, or you can guess it for yourself? Right, nothing. Protected by the Vatican, of course. Mr. Joseph Rowan, a Catholic writer, comments on the diplomatic agreement between the Vatican and the Nazi Reich on the 8th of July 1933. Quote, "The Concordat brought to the National Socialist government, considered nearly everywhere to be made up of usurpers, if not brigands, the seal of an agreement with the oldest international power, the Vatican. In a way, it was the equivalent of a diploma of international honorability. We can read that in the Catholicisme politique en Allemagne, meaning the Catholic politic in Germany, Paris 1956. Thus, the Pope, not satisfied with giving his personal support to Hitler, granted in this way the moral support of the Vatican to the Nazi Reich. At the same time as the terror was beginning to reign on the other side of the Rhine and was tactically accepted and approved, the so-called brown shirts, the SA, had already put 40,000 persons into concentration camps. The pogroms were multiplying to the accents of the Nazi march. Quote, "When the Jewish blood streams from the knife, we feel better again." Unquote. This is a part from the Horst Wessel-Lied, the song of the SA. And the SA was then done away with in the blood purge, the Night of the Long Knives in 1934. The following years, Antichrist Pope Pius XII saw even worse without being stirred. It is not surprised that the Catholic heads of Germany vied with each other in their civility towards the Nazi regime, encouraged as they were by their Roman master. One must read the disheveled ravings and verbal acrobatics of opportunist theologians such as Michael Schmaus. He was later made a Prince of the Church by Pope Pius XII and described as, quote, "the great theologian of Munich" by the publication La Croix, the Cross, on the 2nd of September 1954. Or again, a certain book entitled Katholisch Konservatives Erbgut, of which someone wrote, quote, "This anthology brings together texts from the main Catholic theorists of Germany, from Gorres to Vogelsang. It makes us believe that National Socialism was born purely and simply out of Catholic ideas." Unquote. Now, I don't want to go too far into that here, but you have to understand that this Michael Schmaus that we have just learned about in this book, he was a teacher of Ratzinger in the time. Ratzinger, who then later became Pope Benedict XVI in 2000 and, what was it, 2005, right? Or 2008, I don't remember anymore, but you know, Pope Benedict XVI. Now, where was I? This anthology, yeah, okay, that I had. The bishops, made to take an oath of allegiance to Hitler by the Concordat, always tried to excel each other in their devotion. Quote, "Under the Nazi regime, we constantly find the fervent support of the bishops in all the correspondence and declarations from ecclesiastical dignitaries." Unquote. In spite of the obvious difference between Catholic universalism and Hitlerian racism, these two doctrines had been harmoniously reconciled, according to Franz von Papen. The reason for this scandalous accord was because, quote, "Nazism is a Christian reaction against the spirit of 1789. Yeah? Nazism is a Christian reaction in the spirit of 1789? Nazism is a Catholic reaction against the spirit of 1789. And this is again where the Jesuits play both sides. With their Illuminati movement, they forced the French Revolution in 1789 with the Enlightenment movement against the Roman Catholic Church on the one hand, and now they say Nazism is a Christian, meaning Catholic, reaction against the spirit of 1789. So it is only the papacy who plays both sides. You have to understand that. The French Revolution, the Enlightenment, was led by Jesuits. And Nazism is a reaction against the spirit of 1789. Well, okay, but it's not a Christian reaction, it is a Catholic reaction, because Catholics are not Christians in the biblical sense. Now let us come back to Michael Schmaus, what I just said, who was professor at the Faculty of Theology in Munich, who wrote, quote, Empire and Church is a series of writings which should which should help the building up of the Third Reich as it unites a National Socialist state to Catholic Christianity. Empire and Church is a series of writings which should help the building up of the Third Reich as it unites a National Socialist state to Catholic Christianity. Entirely German and entirely Catholic, these writings explore and favor relations and meetings between the Catholic Church and National Socialism. They open the way for a fruitful cooperation as outlined in the Concordat. Quote, "The National Socialist movement is the most vigorous and massive protest against the spirit of the 19th and 20th centuries. The idea of a people of one blood is the focal point of its teachings, and all Catholics who obey the instructions of the German bishops will have to admit that this is so. The laws of National Socialism and those of the Catholic Church have the same aim." Unquote. Very important sentence, right? The laws of National Socialism and those of the Catholic Church have the same aim. We read that in Begegnungen zwischen katholischem Christentum and nationalsozialistischer Weltanschauung von Aschendorf, published in Munster 1933, which means in English meetings between Catholic Christendom and National Socialist worldview from Aschendorf. This document proves the primordial part played by the Catholic Church in the rise to power of Hitler. In fact, it was a pre-established arrangement. It illustrates fully the kind of monstrous agreement between Catholicism and Nazism. The hatred of liberalism, which is Protestantism, which is the key to everything, comes out very clearly. In his book Catholique d'Allemagne, Mr. Robert Darcourt of the French Academy writes, quote, "The most vulnerable point in all the episcopal declarations which followed the triumphant elections of the 5th of March 1933 is found in the first official document from the Church containing the signatures of all the German bishops. We are referring to the pastoral letter of the 3rd of June 1933, in which the whole of the German episcopate is involved. What form does this document take? How does it start? On a note of optimism and with a cheerful declaration. Quote, "The men at the head of this new government have, to our great joy, given us the assurance that they place themselves and their work on Christian ground. A declaration of such deep sincerity deserves the gratitude of all Catholics." Unquote. Yeah? Did you understand that well, this quote? The men at the head of this new government, speaking about the National Socialist Nazi government, the Third Reich in Germany, have, to our great joy, speaking of Roman Catholics, given us the assurance that they place themselves and their work on Catholic ground. Well, it says Christian ground, but you have to read that on Catholic ground. A declaration of such deep sincerity deserves the gratitude of all Catholics. Yeah. We will come to even much more information on how the Roman Catholic Church works together with the Third Reich. It is absolutely worth your while when you follow this reading of this complete book. Don't forget, we are only still in the foreword. And I still got a few pages to go. Sorry for the length of the video, but this is important. Since the start of the First World War, several popes have come and gone, but their attitude has been invariably the same towards the two fractions which confronted each other in Europe. Many Catholic authors couldn't hide their surprise and grief when writing about the inhumane indifference shown by Pius XII in the face of the worst kind of atrocities committed by those in his favor. Amongst many testimonies we will quote one of the most moderate in its wording, brought against the Vatican by Mr. Jean d'Hôpital, correspondent of Monde. Quote, "The memory of Pius XII is surrounded with misgiving. First of all, there is this burning question asked by observers from every nation and within the walls of the Vatican. Did he know of certain atrocities committed during this war, started and led by Hitler? Having at his disposition at all times and from every quarter the regular reports from the bishops, could he ignore what the German military heads could never pretend to? The tragedy of the concentration camps, the civilians condemned to deportation, the cold-blooded massacres of those who stood in the way, the terror of the gas chambers where, for administrative reasons, millions of Jews were exterminated? And if he knew about it, why didn't he, as trustee and first chorister of the gospel, come out dressed in white, arms extended in the shape of the cross, to denounce a crime without precedent, to shout, 'No!' Why? Because he was the initiator of all of this. So you can write books and ask questions, but when you don't understand that the papacy is the biblical, historical, and prophetic Antichrist, you will always keep asking yourself these questions. Why doesn't the Pope come out dressed in white, arms extended in the shape of the cross, to denounce a crime without precedent, to shout, 'No, no, 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 no'? Because he is the initiator of all of these, and just being quiet and not saying a word is easier than to say something. Well, he doesn't take any sides. He waits until it is all over and then presents himself as the quote-unquote Prince of Peace. But let's continue in the book. Pious souls will search in vain encyclical letters, speeches, and addresses of the late Pope. There is no trace of any condemnation of this religion of blood instituted by Hitler, this Antichrist. They will not find the condemnation of racism, which is an obvious contradiction to the Catholic dogma." Unquote. So, even taking into consideration my little comment in there, that was a lengthy quote from Mr. Jean d'Hôpital in the Monde, which is another word, which is the French word for world. But in this latest sentence it read, "There is no trace of any condemnation of this religion of blood instituted by Hitler, this Antichrist." No, no, no. Hitler is not the Antichrist. The Pope is the Antichrist. In his book, Le Silence de Pied Douce, that means in English the silence of Pope Pius XII, published by Durocher in Monaco 1965, the author Carlo Falconi writes in particular, quote, "The existence of such monstrosities, exterminations en masse of ethnic minorities, prisoners, and deported civilians, overthrows every standard of good and evil. They defy the dignity of their individual being and society in general to such an extent that we are compelled to denounce those who have influenced public opinion, be they ordinary civilians or heads of states. To keep quiet in the face of such outrages would amount in fact to downright collaboration." Yeah. When you are silent, you are agreeing, right? That's why I made it my work to cry out who the Antichrist is. I am not silenced about the truth. I will never be silenced in the name of the truth. To keep quiet in the face of such outrages would amount in fact to downright collaboration. I do not collaborate with evil. I am exposing it. But let's continue the quote. To keep quiet in the face of such outrages would amount in fact to downright collaboration. It would stimulate the villainy of the criminals, stirring up their cruelty and vanity. But if every man has the moral duty to react when confronted with such crimes, it is doubly so of the religious societies, doubly so of their religious societies and their heads, and above all the head of the Catholic Church. Pope Pius XII never expressed a direct and explicit condemnation of the war of aggression, even less about the unspeakable crimes committed by the Germans or their accomplices during that war. Pius XII did not keep quiet because he did not know what was happening. He knew of the gravity of the situation from the start, maybe even better than any other head of state in the world. Unquote. Yes, absolutely, because he was the instigator of it all. Right. There is better still. The Vatican gave a helping hand to the carrying out of these crimes by lending some of its prelates to be made into pro-Nazi agents. These were Messengers Linka and Tiso. It also sent to Croatia its own legate, R.P. Marconi, who, with the help of Monsignor Stepinac, had to keep an eye on the work of Antipavelic and its Eustaches. Wherever we look, the same edifying spectacle presents itself. Now, if you want to learn a little bit more about the Eustachi, about the working of Monsignor Stepinac and Antipavelic, I ask you to turn to my book reading of Behind the Dictators, where there is spoken extensively on that subject. As we have already shown, it is not only this monstrous partiality and complacency that we object to. The Vatican's unpardonable crime lies in the decisive part played in the bringing about of 2 world wars. Listen to what Mr. Alfred Grosser, professor at the Institute of Political Studies of Paris University, says. Quote, "The very concise book of Günther Lewy, The Catholic Church and Nazi Germany, says that all the documents agree to show the Catholic Church cooperating with the Hitler regime." Now, if you are not aware of the book of Günther Lewy, The Catholic Church and Nazi Germany, again, go to my book reading Behind the Dictators. It is mentioned there too. Quote, "In July 1933, when the Concordat forced the bishops to swear an oath of allegiance to the Nazi government, the concentration camps were already open. The reading of quotations compiled by Günther Lewy proves this overwhelmingly. We find in them some crushing evidence from personalities such as Cardinal Faulhaber and the Jesuit Gustav Grundlach." Unquote. Only empty words can be found to oppose this stack of evidence which proves the culpability of the Vatican and its Jesuits. Their help was the main force behind the lightning rise of Hitler, who, together with Mussolini and Franco, who in spite of appearances were but war pawns manipulated by the Vatican and its Jesuits, the puppet masters. The authorities of the Vatican must bow their heads in shame when an Italian member of parliament cries out, quote, "The Pope's hands are dripping with blood," unquote, which comes from a speech by Laura Diaz, Member of Parliament of Livorno, delivered at Ortona the 15th of April 1946. Or when the students of Cardiff University College choose at the theme for a conference, quote, "Should the Pope be brought to trial as a war criminal?" Unquote. Well, I have to make a little excursion into the Bible and into Revelation 17, because we have here the quote from Laura Diaz, Member of Parliament of Livorno, who says in the Parliament, who cries out, "The Pope's hands are dripping with blood." Alright? So when we go into Revelation 17, we go into verse 6 and we read, "And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration." So what this Miss Laura Diaz said, the Pope's hands are dripping with blood, in the Parliament of Livourne in Ortona in 1946 is confirmation of the Bible. Revelation chapter 17 verse 6, as I've just read to you. Now here is how Pope John the 23rd expressed himself when referring to the Jesuits. Listen closely. Pope John the 23rd addressing the Jesuits. Quote, "Persevere, dear sons, in the activities which have already brought you well-known merits. In that way you will gladden the Church and will glow with untiring ardor. The path of the just is as the light of dawn. May that light grow and illuminate the molding of the adolescents. In that way you will help to carry out our spiritual wishes and concerns. We give our apostolic blessing with all our heart to your Superior General, to you and your coadjutors, and to all the members of the Society of Jesus." Unquote. And from the Antichrist who followed John the 23rd, the next one, Pope Paul VI, we read, quote, also addressed to the Jesuits, "From the time of its restoration, this religious family enjoys the sweet help of God, and has enriched herself very quickly with great progress. The members of the Society of Jesus have accomplished many important deeds, all to the glory of God and for the benefit of the Catholic religion. The Church needs soldiers of Christ with valor, armed with dauntless faith, ready to confront difficulties. That is why we have great hope in the help your activity will bring. May the new era find the Society on the same honorable path as it trod in the past." Unquote. Given in Rome, near St. Peter on the 20th of August 1964, during his second year as Pope, and meaning addressing the Jesuits during Vatican II. On the 29th of October 1965, L'Osservatore Romano announced, quote, "The Very Reverend Father Arupe, General of the Jesuits, celebrated Holy Mass for the Ecumenical Council on the 16th of October 1965. Unquote. So, the General of the Jesuits, Pedro Arupe, celebrated Holy Mass for the Vatican Council on the 16th of October 1965. Here is the apotheosis of papal ethics. The simultaneous announcement of a project to beatify Pope Pius XII and John the 23rd. Quote, "To strengthen ourselves in our striving for a spiritual renewal, we have decided to start the canonical proceedings for the beatification of these two great and godly pontiffs who are so dear to us." Well, I'm sorry, I have to make a little comment, because you have to understand that it is very important for the Roman Catholic Church to beatify Pope Pius XII and to take every doubt of that he was a very, very good, between quotation marks, good Pope. To take any doubt away from that is very, very important for the Roman Catholic Church because of the doctrine of the Assumption of Mary that Pope Pius XII introduced into the Roman Catholic Church. And when you read chapter 7, the fourth part of The Two Babylons by Alexander Hislop, you will understand that the image of the beast is the Queen of Heaven, is Mary. And that's why the beatification of Pope Pius XII is so important to the Roman Catholic Church. Now the author continues, "May this book reveal to all those who read it the true nature of this Roman master, whose words are mellifluous as his secret actions are ferocious. And here ends the author with the foreword, and we are going to continue in section 1, the founding of the Jesuit order, next time, when I will read to you the book The Secret History of the Jesuits from Edmond Paris. I'm sorry it took this long, it's almost 1.5 hours, but I wanted to make sure to get it all. And well, it's an introduction, but it's also something that should stir up interest in your following me reading this book or downloading the book for yourself. The link on the internet where you can download this book as a PDF free will be provided in the description box of the video. So with 85 minutes I'm done, and thank you for your attention, thank you for listening and watching the video, thank you for your comments and encouragement that I do this work, and until next time, God bless you. Joggler66 from Hour of the Truth says bye bye.
Especially I work in dealing with the infiltration of churches and religious institutions as well as government. That cover a tremendous number of institutions.
And the purpose of that infiltration was what for?
Well, the purpose is what the Roman Catholic system has all the time as her own purpose, is to infiltrate, to penetrate all the areas of life where the Roman Catholic can have control and access for the coming world government.
Simply put, this country and this world benefit from your commitment to Jesuit principles, to being men.
As a graduate of another great Jesuit institution, Xavier University, I have great affection for the value and purpose of a Jesuit education.
What that means is, in preparation for that world government, the Roman Catholic institution, especially since the establishment of the Jesuit order in 1541, throughout all these 500 years, they've been in preparation and through infiltration and penetration of every level of society in order to take over the world politically and religiously.
What a beautiful day the Lord has made. Holy Father, on behalf of Michelle and myself, welcome to the White House.
There are two doctrines that define very well these dangerous goals of the Roman Catholic institution. Two doctrines define this very well. One is called the doctrine of the apostolic succession, and that is dealing with the papacy. And the other is the doctrine, the temporal power, and that is dealing with world government. Of course, both, because you can see that even the Pope and his own individual office, he meet those requirements. He is not only the head of his church, as he called himself, John Paul II, the present Pope. He said he is the pastor of his church. He is not only that, but he is the head of his state.
It is a sign, perhaps, of how far we have come in this country that today's news of formal recognition between the governments of the United States and the Vatican did not create a furor. Once upon a time, it would have. Once upon a time, and not all that long ago, it did.
From the time of President Washington, that was the first president to be utilized by the Jesuits. If you were not aware of that, President Washington already was initiated by the Jesuits to bring about the first communication with the Vatican ever known in this country. From there on, President Reagan, throughout all this time, President Reagan has come to fulfill the greatest moment in the history of this conspiracy.